Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to an activity that we are sponsoring during Public Service Week. And today we are fortunate to hear from faculty about their perspectives on public service. And what we are going to do is we have several questions to ask them. And I ask each of them to limit their comments, if they can, to 2 or 3 minutes. And then we can speak, and then if there are any questions from the audience. I'd like to introduce our faculty before we start. On our far left is Rachel Enos. Sitting next to her is Yahang Zhang. Next to her is Michael Dillard. And here at the other end is Suzanne Piotrowski. And so we are very fortunate to have 4 of our faculty members from SPA. First question I'd like to ask each of you is, what made you decide to teach in a school that prepares students for careers in public service? Rachel?
So public service is probably the, if not one of the most noble professions, one of the most important, critical elements for a society that treats its people equitably. And so educating public servants is thus a critical component of making a good society or a better world. And I was very fortunate to fall into the field of public affairs. And then teaching at Rutgers Newark, we're able to witness a reflection of true public service at an institutional level with regards to diversity and inclusion, the resiliency and representativeness of the university, and even its just sheer integrity in how it educates its students.
Thank you. Yahang?
Okay, what made me to decide to teach in a school that prepares students in the public administration career? I think the decision, for me was made when I pursued the PhD degree, right? I have a background in economics and business management. I got a bachelor in economics and a master's degree in business management in China from Nanjing University. And I thought, government is so big, so powerful, and so we have to understand the government. Some questions like, is government like providing services instead of rather than just ruling the people? And the second is government providing services with efficiency, effectiveness, fairness, and and with other like democratic values. So those questions should be answered, like with training in the field. So public administration is professional training. So I think that's what I pursued for the degree, and with that training, I'm able to teach at Rutgers to students in the MP program and also in other programs. Anyway, it's in public administration and public affairs.
Thank you. Michael?
Well, for me, I have a unique approach. I actually, before coming to SPA, I was an executive director managing nursing homes and assisted living facilities. However, I completed my master's in public administration in 2010 here at Rutgers University, Newark. But for me, it was always home, Rutgers University, particularly SPA. And for me, coming back consistently thereafter graduating, I would consistently come out to speak to students, particularly EOF, Educational Opportunity Fund students. And for me, that was my love, that was my passion I felt overall. Being able to speak to students that look like me, who've come from similar backgrounds, challenges, and so forth, and really just seeing their faces overall light up. So I had to make the tough, difficult decision to say to myself, since I love this so much, am I willing at the time to make a career move? And for me, it was a no-brainer, absolutely. Actually, in fact, I had a great mentor at the time, Norma Ricucci, who recommended me to teach an undergraduate course. My first course here at SPA was Ethical Public Service. So just the opportunity of being able to inspire public service individuals, just the opportunity to really see that change and really kind of cheerlead them on. For me, that was the greatest opportunity. So for now, I can say I've been teaching with the School of Public Affairs and Administration for 6 years. And I love every moment of being able to inspire my students, being able to kind of galvanize them and really cheerlead them on to take on public service positions.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Great, thanks so much. I'm listening to my colleagues here, and I feel like my story is a little bit of everybody's, like Rachel, I sort of fell into this. I don't know if anybody knows this, but as an undergrad, I took a class in public administration, maybe like some of ours, and it was taught by the city manager, and he came in one day with these boxes of like government documents to fill in grant applications, and it was just a big mess. And like the whole point was like government's important, but it's also messy, and it was just so exciting. And so I literally got an A+ in that class, like on my transcript, an A+, and I thought, well, maybe this is something I should look into, and this is my passion. So after that, I went on, I got a minor, I went and got an MPA, probably like most of you here, and just realized that this is what I want to do. And when I was working I went and got my master's at the University of Delaware, and I worked for the Secretary of Finance when I was there, John Carney, who then went on to be congressman and is now actually governor of the state of Delaware. And it was just, I realized like I love implementation, I love the idea of policy implementation, I love the idea that it matters how things are implemented, and that's it. So I went and got a PhD, and here I am. So I've been at Rutgers since 2003 for 16 years, and I think it's a privilege to work in a public institution to teach students public service.
Thank you. I just have to chime in just a little of my story for a minute. I was an economics major, and I was sitting in my economics class one day, and I was watching people put all these equations on the board, and I said, what am I doing here? And I was taking a course in public administration, fell in love with it, and I don't even want to talk about how many decades ago it was. But it's a wonderful field to be in. Is this better? The second question is, how can you prepare students to work in public service, specifically in government, given what is going on now? It could be scary. Rachel?
So this is a great, difficult question. And so the items that I quickly thought of are probably factors that most employees should reflect on, but these are really critical thinking points for someone who works in government and public service generally. So students need to learn how to distinguish between facts and opinions, especially when it comes from a source of authority. And so learning how to navigate the power dynamics of that relationship. They need to be critical consumers and producers of information. So understanding that words and numbers have power when we communicate them. And so we need to be sure that we are doing so ethically and with the correct objectives. Students need to build for themselves a set of core public values that can help to inform their behaviors and their decisions when they have the discretion to make those choices. And then from that list, and this is the hardest part, they need to identify a set of like non-negotiables. So where do you draw the line at work at which point your core sense of self is at play? And so what is the line that you are unwilling to cross, regardless of it being demanded by your supervisor? At what point do you say, this isn't about loyalty or obedience, it's about lawfulness and appropriateness? And I understand that decision in itself varies with the amount of privilege that someone has and their capacity to leave a position that they currently have. But at the same time, people need to, look at themselves in the mirror and understand that they're standing up for the right things. And so that's critical decisions that many government employees have to make multiple times a day. And so hopefully we're helping to prepare our students for that.
Thank you. Johan?
Yes, I think it's really true. Have a really good coverage on everything. I just follow up, still, I think, I totally agree with everything. And also, especially students should differentiate between opinion and facts. And especially today, so many opinions, and people have different opinions. The society is deeply divided, and to the point that people cannot listen to each other, cannot talk to each other, cannot deliberate, on issues, which are important for society and for the government. So, I think, for me, because I'm teaching research methods classes, applied statistics and quantitative research methods. So I think, I have the passion to train students with analytical skills, let them to see the facts, not only the opinion, right? And be aware that people could be misled by some extreme stories. We should see the whole picture, and all decisions should be made on a rational basis. So I think, through coursework, students can be equipped with those hard skills and analyze the facts, see the real world. So
Thank you.
that's my answer.
Let me ask you just another question. Would you be answering these questions any differently if you were still in China?
That's a good question. If I was in China, still, hard skills are important. But in China, I don't really have that much freedom to speak. If we talk about the divided society, people say in China it's united, it's united, in the surface, not really, true. But here, I really appreciate the freedom that we can speak loudly and free.
Thank you. Thank you. Michael?
Wow, so where to begin then with my colleagues, then pretty much taking everything I was going to say. So for me, and I have a lot of respect for our world-renowned faculty, but I think I've brought a sense of a practitioner standpoint, having had the ability to work in long-term care, even worked in the mortuary science business for quite some time. For me, one of the things that I'd like to do in terms of preparing students, whether it's in government or managing a nonprofit organization, more importantly, is how to make sound decisions. Really operating with a high level of integrity. I think of administrative ethics and utility. Just this opportunity in terms of having professional experience, being able to overall stand up for what's right. And for me, some of my teaching philosophies have been overall throughout the years here at SPOS, really exposing students to actual practitioners in the field. So that way they can too understand beyond just simply the theoretical components and the theoretical concepts of what it takes overall to be a public administrator, but in particularly during such challenging times as you think about what's going on right now in government. So for example, I think about a few years ago when we actually had a class session at Newark City Hall. And that was a great opportunity for students to be able to understand. They had the opportunity to sit there with Newark Mayor Raz Baraka and his entire team, as well as city council officials, and to really be able to understand what it takes to manage government, what it takes in terms of managing various offices, various staff, and the level of responsibility that really is bestowed upon you. Really being able to understand the many nuances, really, of once you become that elected official, once you take on this position as an executive director of a nonprofit organization, there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. There's a lot of weight on your shoulders, and it really falls on you. And oftentimes I prepare my students in terms of the buck starts and stops with you. That you have to have that professional experience. You have to rely on a team. You have to go based on your professional experience. What is the data also saying? But really relying on your gut. And most of the times we know what's the difference between right versus wrong. We know exactly what we need to do versus what we should be doing. And so I think for me personally, it's just preparing the students, having various practical application methods or approaches so that we students are best prepared.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yeah, great, thanks. It's sort of fun going at the end because most of my points are already taken, but like, it's also heartening to know we all have, we value many of the same similar things, which are values, which is what I was going to talk about. And like Michael, I teach administrative ethics and also teach ethics to the undergrad, and particularly in the master's level, I talk a lot about conflicts of interest, conflicts of authority, which are the power dynamics that you were talking about, and role conflicts. And I think it's important for our students and practitioners to understand these concepts and to have the language to be able to talk about them and recognize them. And then also, really just the last point, which is the same thing as values conflicts, that there are values conflicts. And this is not a bad thing, this is a good thing. And we need to be able to recognize them and be able to talk about the different values that are at play, and recognize that different people have different values, and that's okay. That's part of the process.
What do you do when you have everything that's going on right now? When you open the paper, when you talk about values, I mean, there are all these politicians who are ending up in prison. What do you do when we have people in office with values that not only don't you agree with, but you might not think are, I don't like to use the word right, but you question? So how do you, when you're training students to go into public service, what do you tell them? How do you deal with this if they're going to go into an organization and they see things going on above them and they say, what's going on here? These are not our values. This is not what we want to see. So that's really, do you find it more difficult now than, well, some of you haven't been teaching that long, but when you started, or when you think about sort of the ideals you had going into training people for public service, what do you think about teaching students now with what's going on at all levels of government, especially higher levels of government?
So I'll take this one because my answer is avoiding the question, so that's perfect. So
That's not fair, Rachel.
yeah, no, I'm gonna do it though. So in November of 2016, around mid-November, I woke up very disappointed one day, and it took me a couple hours, a couple days or weeks probably, to realize what a privilege it was to not be embarrassed by our country until then. To feel that the country represented my values until that point. It didn't, right? America's made mistakes since before it was the United States of America. We have a very long track record of not living up to the values that we say we do. I think it is more transparent and overt, the mismatch of our purported values versus what we're actually practicing. But I think we have to acknowledge that the U.S. has always been an attempt at democracy. It has never fulfilled its promise. And I think that's part of what makes public service so amazing, is that we will never reach that finish line. It always gets farther ahead. And that's a really lovely thing because, well, there's always going to be jobs. So that's good. But it's also really important to know that public service has to reflect the society that it is there to help govern. And so as society evolves, so too should public service. And so while we have great examples to analyze for the lack of public service values in them, we can look at any point in our country's history and identify other examples there.
Okay. Yeah.
The values is really difficult, but I think the good thing in the United States is that no any administration, high administration can stay there forever. We can always have an election every 4 years. So I believe public values still exist among people. And at least, scholars, professors, students in public education still hold the values. I think that's the hope we have. And lots of discussions in class, can reflect the important values we have right now. And also not only the values we have, but also we have the ability to implement in a rational way, to see the real world, with the real real evidence. So, with understanding the facts, we, I think we should have, or we will have a hope to implement or represent important values.
Thank you. Michael?
So until elections come up again, I think we really have to, take a stab at it in terms of what everyone just talked about, this idea of not only just having values, but being able to speak up. Being able to know in your gut the difference between truth, facts, or perhaps lies. And unfortunately, I think we all can agree that there's been a lot of lies going on right now. But I think as a public administrator, you have to do the right thing. You have to be able to document. You have to be able to, as a fearless leader, step out, whether it's on faith, whether it's out on your professional experience that you bring to the table. And then, yes, you need to understand it from a theoretical standpoint, and you really need theory, but when you're getting out here into this real world and you're going to become the next governor, the next mayor, the next president of the United States, you're going to have to be able to speak up. You're going to have to be able to hold people accountable, and often at times, and it goes back to what you just simply stated, Marilyn, in terms of what happens when you report to a boss that's doing unethical acts? And then do you simply just follow them? Or do you, again, speak up? Do you challenge that? Do you document it? Do you go outside of that and perhaps report it? So again, you have to be able to have, I think, the understanding of the nuances, but you also have to be able to, again, and it's going to feel uncomfortable, but being able to do the right thing and being able to speak up. That's character right there. Speaking up and speaking the truth.
Thank you. Suzanne?
I agree with all my colleagues, but I would also say, I'm not really sure I am teaching that differently than I was before, because, conflicts of authority, conflicts of interest, role conflicts, these are things we talk about in administrative ethics. We've been talking about them for a long time, and they're important now, they were important 10 years from now, they're 10 years ago, 10 years from now, and that we need to understand what's unethical, what's illegal, and what's a difference of opinion, and being able to work through that. And hopefully a lot of our students aren't dealing with people who are in situations where people are doing something illegal or taking bribes, but they are going to be dealing with different values. Somebody wants to build a park and somebody wants to build a senior center, right? And we need to be able to talk about those things on a micro level also, and that discourse, I think, is important.
Thank you. I know in my experiences over the past couple of years that students come in sometimes very chagrined. They say, Professor Rubin, I've always wanted to work for government, and I feel now that it's going to be more difficult. And so I think with responses like this, and I think it's something that we all have to think about. How do we do this in times like this? I think it becomes very difficult. But I think, you're all saying that it can be done, and maybe it is the idea of hope, that when we're training people who are going to come into public service, preparing them to deal with some of these issues. My last question is sort of related more to you as individuals, and it's how is the research and the work that you do related to public service? But in order to answer that question, I think you have to talk a little bit about your research and about what you do, and then how that relates to public service. Rachel?
So, and I was going to be like, Suzanne, you can go first this time, but you can't take my answers, so I'll just, I mean, you can, it just wouldn't make sense. So my research is around sustainable development, sustainability, and the green economy. And then over the past year and a half or so, I have begun to do research on local food systems as well. And so at its core, sustainability is about using resources in a way that is equitable, efficient, and effective for the short, medium, and long term. There's other fancier definitions, but that's really what it means. It's ensuring that the current generation can sustain its livelihood while not diminishing the capacity of future generations to do the same. So we're not using it all up at the present, and then our grandchildren won't have a world to be welcomed into. And obviously, when we talk about equitable and efficient resource use, we're talking about public service. If politics is who gets what when, sustainability is making sure that when is for a long time, that who is for everyone, and that what is moderately equitable. And so sustainability is about making the world a better place, And I think that is the core of what public service is about as well. And then local food systems are an example of a policy system that is itself sustainable. So local food system is just that, where you grow and consume food in the same area. So you have like farmers markets, people buy the food and then they eat it from the farmer who lives down the block. And so obviously local food systems benefit the economy as well as the community and of course the environment. And so in that way, they're a great illustration of sustainability, but they're also just a great illustration of a really good local policy that helps to raise up a community's livelihood.
Thank you. Yahan?
Okay. Yeah, I think people have a really deep concern about the government in terms of the integrity and ethics. People think the government might be, corrupt. So my research focuses on anti-corruption. To see, for example, what factors might lead to more corrupt government at country level and individual level. And another research I'm conducting right now, is divided society. Because people talk a lot, and so far no empirical research on that, no quantified measure of the divided society, how deeply it's divided. So I try to use survey data to measure the division, right? And also to see the consequences of the division, on the government. Especially we think the government is collaborating government. Everyone should contribute their own parts. So if if the society is so deeply divided, we cannot talk, we cannot deliberate, and we cannot compromise to each other, the government won't work at all. So that's my research. I think the purpose is still to wish the government to provide service in a effective way, in an efficient way, and also with integrity and public values.
Thank you. Michael?
So for me, as a new researcher in the game, I just finished my doctorate from Rowan University, a doctorate in higher education administration, and some of my research that I focused on more so was creating various supportive programs for students, non-traditional students in a community college setting. Because based on the research, at least when I did my study over at Essex County College, 99.5 students coming in need to take at least one developmental course.
Really?
And unfortunately, it's non-credit bearing. And so what are some of the various programs that we're having in place to make sure that they're going to finish out on time within the 2 years or perhaps 3 years? So for me personally, what am I doing to really affect change in the classroom, to go based on your question, Marilyn, is more so creating practical application, creating various events for my students so that they are prepared to go into a career of public service. So for example, whether it's having class at Newark City Hall, whether it's just recently we had a major food initiative at the community food bank in Hillside, where we packed up boxes of food for needy families. Really making sure that students understand that, again, it starts and stops with them, that they have to take on that role as a responsible citizen. They need to be understanding and really compassionate about various issues that are going on. And what are you going to do to be that change agent? Of course, we could talk for hours about, well, let's blame it on the government. But in terms of what are you going to do overall about it? What are we doing? So for me, it's getting in the classroom, explaining what are current problems that are going on, but then now creating an opportunity or solution in terms of how will you take the matter into your own hands? How will you go about addressing those issues then, rather than, again, consistently complaining about the current administration and what they are or not doing?
Thank you. Suzanne?
Thank you. So my research generally focuses on transparency in government. I've basically one-trick pony. I've built a career on this. I've looked at it from different angles. I've studied federal government and management reform, how that's affected transparency in government. I've studied local level transparency in government here in New Jersey, Open Public Records Act, Open Public Meetings Act. And so at all different levels, right now I'm working on a book on the Open Government Partnership, which is a multinational initiative that pushes, advocates for open government, and I'm really interested in, it's a co-author project, we're really interested in how a multinational initiative is trying to affect governance reform, domestic governance reform, which is something I think public administration scholars don't really think about that much, the impact of these international organizations on domestic reform. So that's something I'm really excited about. I won't bore everybody with all of the details, but to the question really that Marilyn asked about how it relates to public service, what I do in my work, in my approach to research, is I feel it's really important to get deeply involved in communities of practice. So not just study the issue from arm's length, but get to know the people, be a part of the community, go to the conferences, be involved, serve on the committees. Right now I'm serving on the U.S. Federal Freedom of Information Act Committee, which sounds a little crazy, the name, but it's an appointment by the National Archivist to work on implementation of FOIA. I've done some research with the Open Government Partnership. Years ago, I was on the New Jersey Foundation for Open Government's board. So these are just examples of ways you can really become part of the communities that you're researching, and I think it informs our work and hopefully helps us disseminate the work back to the groups that are interested in it.
Thank you. Do any of you have any comments that you'd like to make to one another?
Just one quick one. To Suzanne's point, to Suzanne's last point though, for students who are looking to become active in an area, just show up. You and I have talked about it before. Showing up, being mentally and physically present at something you are interested in is like more than 60% of the job. So if you see a task force or a council or a committee or a meeting that you're interested in, show up, right? And then when you sign up, do the work. Don't not do the work. But it is that easy. A lot of life is who you know, but then there's also just a lot of open doors waiting for someone to walk through. And so if you see an open door of an area that you're interested in, take it, because then you can become the expert. Don't let someone bestow that title. You can work your way up towards it.
Okay, I'm going to throw a zinger at all of you now. A question I didn't give you in advance. I would like to ask you all, if we were to ask you to go to a local high school and talk to juniors and seniors in high school who are considering what they would like to study, what they would like to be, how would you talk to them about considering a career in public service? Suzanne, you can start this one.
Great.
This is a zinger.
Okay. How local high schools, junior and seniors, what's important about public service? Why they should go into
Right,
it?
why not go to business school? Why would you be interested in a career in public service?
It's so obvious to me. I mean, it's like public service is where it's at. We need to, this is what we do, right? It's bigger than us. It's not about the bottom line. Government is there to help people. The nonprofit sector are there to help people, and you can be a part of that if you're involved in public service in some way. I know I'm getting animated, but we've all dedicated our careers to this. I think people need to know, and for some reason we don't talk about it enough with the youth, that they think about going into business, but they don't think they could, even if they don't get an MPA, they don't think they can use that accounting degree in the public sector. They just don't think of it as an option. And so I would be happy to be a cheerleader and explain to them why it's so important to commit your life to something more than making money. Okay, so.
Michael?
Well, I think I have a great advantage because in addition to teaching for SPA, I serve as a full-time director of a pre-college program here on the campus, the Are You Ready for Work program. And I'm proud to say that over the past 7 years under my leadership, we've had a 100% graduation rate from high school and getting into college. In fact, we actually have a career track that's called Public Healthcare Services. So we are exposing students at the junior and the senior level in terms of careers in public service. Really being able to understand that it's so broad, as just Susan has stated, in terms of just the various career opportunities that they can pursue, whether it's, again, starting a nonprofit organization, whether it's going into government. Well, you know what, I want to actually go into corporate America. Well, what about thinking about it from social responsibility in terms of it? So again, for us, we started at the high school level. We bring in various faculty members from SPA as well as some of the administrators to talk about the rewarding career in public service. I think one of the biggest challenges with high school students is that it's a no-brainer when you think of nursing, when you think of business. But how do you really overall define public administration? And often at times, high school students are completely unaware, well, what is that? What is public administration?
Did you know what public administration was?
No, at the time when I was in high school, no. So again, I had an idea of it, but not in terms of really fully understanding it. So for me, my undergrad degree was actually in business. And then my master's was in public administration, and then I did a doctorate in higher education. So one of the things, because of teaching for SPA, we're really focused on with this particular career track, public healthcare services, and make sure that students are understanding it. So whether we have a local trip, at Newark City Hall, whether we take our students up to University Hospital and they have the opportunity to understand careers beyond just healthcare. So I think that's one of the biggest ways that we expose high school students, particularly juniors and seniors, as it relates to career opportunities, the rewarding career itself in the field of public administration.
Good question. I think it might be easier to tell junior and senior high school students than adults, public service, because they are in the age with lots of dreams. They want to change the world. How can you change the world? Go to the public service. And if you are not satisfied with the current government, go to public service. So I have a story. I just think of a story. My friend's daughter just joined Teaching America, and with giving up a really good job offer from a large bank. Where she could make a lot of money, but he gave that good offer and joined. That's called Teaching America, right?
Teach for America?
Teaching for America.
Yeah.
Teaching for America. And her parents are kind of angry because they pay a lot of tuition for her at Yale University, lots of money, and they want to get money back, right? And I really appreciate her decision to do some public services before she starts a career. I think that's kind of built up of public service spirit. With the practice, you really go to the world to do public service. So I think that high school, that's a good age for them to learn public service. If we could, I think in the future we may provide some courses, some easy courses, to high school students. And with that, I think we will have a better hope.
And I love you're easier to teach them than adults.
Yeah.
And Rachel, last but not first.
It's hard to go last. Yes, so I think that there are two key discussions within this question, right? So one is, do the students even know what public administration is? The second is, how do you encourage high school juniors and seniors to seek any specific career? And to get to the second question first, I don't know that we actually do have to encourage a 17-year-old to figure out how they want to spend the next 70 years. I did not know when I was 17 where I would be in 5 years, let alone however many years later it is. And so I think that encouraging students and youth generally to recognize when they are happy, what is it that you're doing? Who is surrounding you? Where are you? What are you performing? Or for whom are you performing it, right? Are you helping someone? Recognizing what makes them happy and figuring out what careers can help to encourage that. Because even if she went into business, and after Yale Law, I'm sure it was very nice, Yale undergrad, it was a very nice school. Yale, I've heard of them. So, but the key is really, what makes you happy to wake up and go to work almost every day? Because it won't be every day. But if you wake up happy with your life, that itself is worth every paycheck in the world combined. No employer can afford my happiness, so I found a career that makes me happy. And I think that once students understand that, we can then talk to them about public service with the understanding that it is everything and everywhere. So, how many people used water today? How many people used electricity? Walked on a sidewalk, drove on the roads, right? Didn't get into a car crash at a traffic light because of public administration. Public administration is what makes life livable when we have to interact in society. And so once students are aware of the roles of public service in every aspect of every day of their life, I think that they will then better recognize all the different career paths and opportunities that they have available. And there's going to be careers in 10 years that we can't even comprehend now, right? Thank goodness for young people, because I don't know how to use a Mac. So there are careers that we cannot comprehend. And so it's not up to us to teach them what to, find their future in, but to figure out what makes them happy and to know that public service isn't always an option, and it's always every option on the table.
And it's always there.
It will always be there, that is true.
Yes. Okay, this has been a wonderful panel.